This happened a week ago. I'm 35 and a freelance journalist. I needed a break from the city and thought writing about urban legends could spark my creativity. So I rented a small cabin in the Oregon woods, surrounded by trees and the sound of a river. At first, it seemed perfect. I enjoyed the quiet and rustic charm. I hoped for inspiration. On my second night, I sat at the table, typing by the soft light of a candle. The flickering flame felt comforting. Suddenly, I heard rustling outside. I froze. It felt like something was out there. At first, I dismissed it as wildlife, a raccoon or something, but then I heard low growling. My heart raced. I shook it off, telling myself it was nothing. But I couldn't shake the chill creeping up my spine. The strange sounds continued. Sometimes whispers floated through the trees. They were quiet, barely audible, but I could feel them. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision. I tried to convince myself I was just imagining things, but when I glanced out the window, nothing was ever there. I would pull back the curtain, holding my breath, but only darkness awaited me. On the fourth night, I woke up suddenly. Something felt off, but I didn't know what. The room was silent, except for the sound of my own breathing. I sat up, noticing how dark it had gotten outside. Really dark. I could barely see the trees against the night sky. That's when I heard it again. A low growl. It seemed closer this time. A surge of fear shot through me. Then I saw it. I didn't want to look, but I found myself moving toward the window. A large shape lingered just past the tree line, shifting in the moonlight. It was too big to be a deer. My heart raced as I squinted. Was it watching me? I'm not sure how long I stood there, staring. Every instinct told me to get away from the window, to hide, but my feet felt glued to the floor. The strange noises continued each night after that. I could hear twigs snapping and whispers. The shadows grew darker, larger somehow. I started to question things. What was out there? Were those just animals? Or something worse? Maybe I was losing my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling like I wasn't alone anymore. On my last night, I gathered my things and braced myself as I stepped outside. I swore I felt eyes on me. I turned to look back at the cabin. Then I heard someone whisper my name. I spun around. Nobody was there. But that's when everything changed. I felt icy fear wrap around my heart. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I looked back, and suddenly the shape was closer. It shifted between the trees. I fought the urge to scream. Not knowing what to do, I just stood there, frozen in place. Then the growling started again. It echoed through the trees. I finally turned and ran toward my car, heart pounding. I was gasping for breath. Just before I got in, I glanced back one last time. It was standing there, watching me, with dark eyes that seemed to know me. I couldn't explain it. I drove away that night, never looking back. I never wrote that article. I never told anyone what I saw. I can still hear the whispers. Something out there still knows my name. I thought I was safe once I left the cabin behind. The road stretched ahead, leading me away from those dark woods. But as I drove, the anxiety settled in. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see something or someone trailing me. The feeling clung to me like a shadow. I needed to clear my head. The next morning, I decided to head to the local diner for breakfast. I figured sitting among people would ease my mind. As I sipped my coffee, I scanned the faces around me, looking for any sign of normalcy. A few locals chatted quietly, bumbled up against the cool morning air. I overheard snippets of conversation about strange events in the woods. "Did you hear about Joe?" one man said to his friend. "Said he saw something out by the old mill. Claims it was as big as a bear, but walked on 2 legs." The hairs on my neck stood up. I had to know more. After I finished my meal, I approached the man who had spoken. "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. What did Joe see?" He turned to me, eyes narrowing. You haven't heard? People in these parts talk about things that don't belong to this world. Woods around here have more than trees and animals. You should be careful what you venture out to find." His tone was grave. "What kind of things?" I asked, trying to mask the chill creeping into my bones. He hesitated, then said, "Things that speak your name. Things that stalk the trees. You'll start to hear whispers. It messes with your mind." The words hit me hard. I hadn't told him what I'd experienced. Could he really know? "I just had a strange experience in the woods. It was probably just my imagination," I stuttered. "It's not just you. It doesn't let go. You'll feel it lurking," he said, leaning closer with an urgency in his voice. "And it wants something from you." Feeling unnerved, I left the diner and headed back to my car. I wanted to leave the town, but something pulled me toward the research library. Urban legends had often fascinated me, and I couldn't shake the feeling I needed to understand what I had stumbled upon. After all, the locals should have answers. When I entered the library, I was hit by the smell of dusty books and old paper. The librarian scrutinized me as I approached the counter. I asked about local folklore, trying to suppress my growing dread. "Ah, you mean the tales of the Whispering Woods?" she replied, not missing a beat. I leaned in closer. "What's the story behind it?" She gave me a tight-lipped smile, as if holding back significant information. "They say, if you hear your name called by the wind, it's already too late. You become part of the woods." Unease prickled through me. I flipped through old newspaper clippings stacked on a table. That's when I saw it. An article dating back years. "Mysterious disappearances in unknown territory." It detailed accounts of people who vanished without a trace near the same woods I had vacationed in. My heart raced as I read. Faces of the missing stared back at me. They looked so alive, so normal. I realized most of these stories were buried deep, like a secret no one wanted to revisit. Just then, I noticed something odd in the corner of the article. A familiar name was mentioned, a person whose disappearance eerily mirrored my experience. Everything felt like a reveal in a horror film. I had to uncover the truth. My fingers trembled as I planned my next move. But I couldn't shake the growing realization that whatever I was digging into was much closer than I anticipated. Just as I stood to leave, the lights flickered ominously. Then everything went dark. I blinked, trying to adjust to the sudden darkness. Silence filled the library, thick and suffocating. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, desperate for any light. I finally found it and switched on the flashlight feature. The beam cut through the shadows, but only revealed dusty shelves and rows of forgotten books. Not a soul remained in the library. It seemed I was alone. I took a breath and tried to steady my nerves. That man in the diner's warning echoed in my mind. Suddenly, I heard a low whisper, almost like a sigh. I froze. It came again, barely audible, tugging at the edges of my sanity. "Help me," it beckoned, chilling my blood. My grip on the phone tightened as I scanned the room, half expecting something to emerge from the darkness. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice shaky. There was no response, just the soft echo of my words. I walked toward the back of the library, driven by a mix of curiosity and fear. Each step felt heavier, as if the air itself was trying to hold me back. A shelf nearby groaned, and my heart nearly stopped. I swung my light toward the source. It was just books, but they were stacked haphazardly, as if someone or something had knocked them over. Nevertheless, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement beyond the farthest aisle. I turned toward it, my heart hammering in my chest. "Hello?" I called out, forcing the words past my throat. Still no answer. I made my way down the aisle, trying not to let the growing dread swallow me whole. That's when I noticed the floor. There were muddy footprints leading deeper into the library, where few dared to tread. I followed them, my sense of caution eroding with each step. They led to a restricted area, marked by a door slightly ajar. I pushed the door open, revealing a small, dimly lit room filled with more newspapers and strange artifacts. My pulse quickened as I stepped inside. This was where the library kept its secrets. The murmur of whispers intensified, swirling in my mind. I spotted a journal sitting open on a table. It was clearly old, the pages yellowed and fragile. I approached it, reading the handwriting frantically. It detailed sightings of creatures in the woods, entities that tormented the people living nearby. Descriptions matched the man's account from the diner about things that walk on two legs. "This is real," I whispered, a mixture of shock and terror flooding over me. The last entry sent chills down my spine. "It knows my name. I hear it just outside. I fear I am becoming one of them." Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and the whispers fell silent. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, but the relief was short-lived. I felt an intense chill race through me, a bone-deep dread that something was off. As I turned to leave the room, I felt a brush against my shoulder. I spun around, but no one stood behind me. Panic surged as reality crashed back in. I raced toward the exit, determined to escape this unsettling place. Just as I reached the door, I realized the footsteps were back. They weren't leading into the library, they were moving toward me. I didn't dare look behind, but instinct screamed that whatever had wandered in was not human. I bolted toward the entrance, my heart pounding in my ears. In the instant I burst through the door, the outside air felt refreshing, a stark contrast to the fear that filled the library. But that sense of safety was crushed when I heard it, a voice, carried on the wind, whispering my name. I stumbled out into the night, my breath coming in short gasps. The cool air did little to calm the fire of anxiety burning in my chest. That voice, it echoed in my mind, distant yet terrifying. I turned, looking back at the library. Dark shadows loomed like watchful sentinels, and I could swear the door I had just exited was now slightly ajar. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. I needed to know what was happening. With determination, I stepped away from the library, trying to find a rational explanation. I pulled up my phone, fingers shaking as I scrolled through a search engine. Cryptid sightings near me. I needed to understand whatever I had stumbled upon. My eyes darted over results, some mentioning unusual figures in the woods, others referring to folklore I was only vaguely familiar with. Then a name stood out among the rest, The Watcher. I clicked on the link and my stomach dropped as I read. It described a creature that lurked in the shadows, whispering names of those it marked. Reports detailed disappearances, eerie sightings, and strange symbols found etched into trees. All at once, dread coiled in my gut. I was a target, just like the people in those articles. That thought sent adrenaline rushing through me. I had to get back to the diner. The man's warning replayed in my mind as I rushed toward my car. The drive felt like an eternity. Every rustle from the trees along the road made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if eyes followed me from the shadows. As I pulled into the diner's lot, I glanced nervously at the woods lining the perimeter. They loomed menacingly, whispering secrets I had no strength to uncover. I dashed inside, the bell chiming as I stepped through the door. The familiar smells of coffee and greasy food comforted me for a moment, but the worried glances from the few patrons inside snapped me back to reality. There was no sign of the man who had warned me, and a part of me feared I wouldn't see him again. "Hey, are you okay?" a waitress named Sarah asked. She had seen the panic on my face as I entered. I hesitated, unsure how to explain what had just happened. I need to know more about that cryptid you mentioned," I stammered. "The one from earlier, the Watcher." Her expression changed, a mix of recognition and concern. "You shouldn't talk about it," she said, quietly, glancing around as if the creature might be lurking just outside. "What do you mean?" I pressed. "There are stories. People have gone missing lately, right in that area," she whispered, urgency creeping into her voice. "You shouldn't get involved." Just then, the bell above the door rang again. I turned, heart racing. The sudden chill that swept through the diner had nothing to do with the air conditioning. A figure entered, cloaked in shadows, and my blood ran cold. I couldn't see their face, but I felt the weight of their gaze. They looked right at me, and in that instant, I understood. It wasn't just a story anymore. I had crossed a line, and now it was time to pay the price. I froze at the sight of the figure. A lump formed in my throat as I tried to look away, but something compelled me to keep my gaze fixed. The person stood near the entrance, their silhouette shrouded in an unsettling darkness. I felt the eyes of everyone in the diner on me, waiting as if they anticipated a catastrophe. "Who are you?" I dared to ask, my voice barely more than a whisper. The figure didn't respond. Instead, they slowly stepped forward, revealing a hood that framed only darkness where a face should have been. "Run," Sarah said suddenly, urgency spilling from her lips. She darted toward the back exit, causing the others to gasp, and I snapped out of my daze. The figure turned its attention toward her, and I knew I had to act. I scrambled after Sarah, my feet pounding against the diner's linoleum floor. We burst out the back door, the night air hitting me like a wave. I could hear the figure's footsteps behind us, the sound echoing in the stillness. There was no time to think. I ran. My heart pounded harder with each step, a steady drum urging me on. "Where do we go?" I shouted. Sarah glanced over her shoulder, her face pale and wide-eyed. "To my car. Hurry." We rounded the corner of the diner and sprinted toward her vehicle. My pulse raced as I fumbled with her keys. My fingers felt awkward and clumsy. I could hear the figure gaining ground, a whisper of movement that sent shivers down my spine. "Unlock it!" Sarah urged. I pressed the button, and the locks clicked open with a mechanical beep. We dove inside, slamming the doors shut just as the figure reached the car. "Drive!" she shouted. My hands shook against the steering wheel as I turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, but I hesitated. The creature was standing silently at the back of the car now, inches away from us. It felt like time had frozen. I could practically feel the weight of its presence pressing against the metal. "Go!" Sarah screamed, her voice slicing through the fear. I slammed the gas pedal and the car lurched forward, tearing away from the diner. As we sped down the road, a sense of relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. "What was that?" I asked between breaths, glancing over at Sarah. "I don't know," she said, staring wide-eyed ahead, "but it's not just a myth. People have gone missing, and now it's after us." I could hardly wrap my mind around what had just happened. I had come looking for answers, but now I was fleeing in terror. The road stretched out endlessly before me, illuminated by the headlights as if it were our only path to escape. Then, out of nowhere, I caught a glimpse of something in the rearview mirror. The figure was keeping pace with us, its shadow stretching long and menacing. We weren't free yet. "Keep driving," Sarah urged, panic rising in her tone. "Don't look back." But I couldn't help myself. I stole another glance in the mirror. That's when I saw it, a symbol, glowing faintly where the figure once stood. It looked strangely familiar, like the one from the articles I had read. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. We weren't just running from a creature, we were running from a curse, and I had no idea how it would end. The road raced beneath us as I kept my foot on the gas. My mind was reeling from the encounter. I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Sarah's breathing was rapid beside me. I could tell she was just as frightened. "What do we do now?" I asked, glancing at her. Her eyes darted around, as if the darkness itself held threats waiting to pounce. "We need to find somewhere safe," she replied, her voice tight. "We can't go home. Not yet." I nodded, trying to focus on the road ahead. The headlights cut through the night, but I felt the weight of the figure still lurking in my mind. It felt like it was right behind us, its shadow tethered to our fate. I glanced back at the mirror again, half expecting to see the glow of that symbol staring back. The outline of a small gas station appeared in the distance, its neon lights flickering like a beacon. "There," I pointed, my anxiety spiking. "Let's stop there." As I turned into the station, a sense of urgency washed over us. We could hear the engine rumble, drowning out everything else. I parked near the pump, but Sarah didn't move. "Should we get out?" I asked, trepidation threading through my voice. "I don't know," she replied. "What if it follows us? We can't just sit here." The thought of getting out made my stomach churn. I didn't want to face whatever that entity was, but we couldn't stay in the car forever. I took a deep breath, willing my muscles to relax. "Let's just grab something, maybe a phone inside. We need to call someone." "Fine," she said, her determination flickering on her face. "But we stick together." We slid out of the car and stepped into the dim light of the gas station. The interior was surprisingly quiet. Shelves lined with snacks and a heavy scent of aged coffee hung in the air. I felt exposed, like our fear was palpable, making the air around us tense. As we approached the counter, something caught my eye. A newspaper lying on the edge of the counter featured a dark headline: "Local disappearances linked to urban legends." Beneath it, the words caught the corner of my vision, a familiar symbol etched into the design. "Look at this," I said, grabbing the paper. Sarah leaned closer, her brows furrowing. "That symbol, it's the same one as before," she whispered. I swallowed hard, realizing that this already deepened the mystery. What does it mean? We had been so consumed with escaping that we hadn't thought about understanding. But before I could answer, the door chimed loudly as someone entered. A man with a weathered face and an eerie calm walked in, glancing from us to the cashier. He wore an old jacket and a hat that struggled to stay on his head. "You two shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice gravelly. "There are things that hunt at night. Old things." "What?" I stammered, a shiver crawling up my spine. "Things that shouldn't be disturbed," he continued, his eyes locking onto mine. "You think you can run forever? You've caught its attention." The words felt like a punch. I didn't want to believe it, but part of me knew he was right. "What do we do?" I asked, panic rising again. "Find the source," he said simply, "before it finds you." The man turned and walked back out into the darkness, leaving an unsettling chill in his wake. As the door closed behind him, I felt a deep sense of dread creeping back. "What source?" Sarah questioned, eyes wide. That's when the lights flickered above us, plunging everything into shadows. I realized we weren't out of danger yet. The lights flickered again, but this time they went out completely. The gas station plunged into darkness, with only the faint glow of the emergency signage providing any illumination. My heart raced. "Stay close," I whispered to Sarah, feeling the subtle shift in the atmosphere. It felt like the shadows were thickening, pressing against us. I could hear the faint thud of my own heartbeat echo in my ears. "Did you see that?" Sarah's voice trembled, her eyes wide. I strained to listen, but the silence was all-consuming. Then I sensed movement, a rustling in the corner of the store. I squinted into the shadows. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence answered. Before I could process what was happening, the emergency lights buzzed to life again, flickering like a dying flame. My stomach dropped as I noticed something lurking behind the shelves, a dark silhouette, still and waiting. "Let's go," I urged Sarah, pulling her arm as I began to back away towards the entrance. But before we could reach the door, a loud crash echoed through the store, causing us both to jump. A shelf had toppled over, spilling bags of chips and candy onto the floor. I glanced back once more, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw the glint of eyes peering back at me from the darkness. "Why is this happening?" Sarah gasped. "What does he mean by source?" "I don't know, but we need to find out before it's too late," I replied, looking at the doorway. It felt like our only escape, yet something pulled at us, urging us to dig deeper. With no other choice, I turned toward the cashier's area. A small back room door was slightly ajar. I hesitated, then nodded at Sarah. "We should check there." "Isn't that where the source is?" she asked, fear evident in her voice. "Maybe," I said, though I wasn't sure. I pushed open the door, its creaking hinges punctuating the eerie silence. The narrow room was dimly lit, filled with boxes piled high. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. I whipped it out, but the screen was black. No signal. I cursed under my breath, frustration rising like a tide. "This place is a dead end," I murmured, scanning the room. A sliver of light peeked through another door at the far end, piquing my curiosity. "Maybe it's an exit," Sarah suggested, inching towards it. "Wait," I cautioned, stepping in front of her. But before I could say more, that cold feeling washed over me again, like icy fingers tracing down my spine. "Did you hear that?" Footsteps echoed from the other side of the back door, heavy and deliberate, pausing just outside. I exchanged a frantic glance with Sarah. We had to act quickly. "On three," I said, holding my breath. 1, 2, 3. We both pushed through the doorway into the next room, just as the door buckled under the weight of an unseen force. I felt a rush of cool air as we stumbled into a narrow hallway, our path unlit and uninviting. But we weren't safe yet. That sense of dread clung tighter than before. I glanced back at the door we had just left. Something was on the other side, and I wasn't waiting to find out what it was. "Run," I whispered urgently. That's when I heard it again, a low growl, deep and resonant, echoing in the stillness. It was close, too close. We ran down the hallway, my breath quickening as that growl rumbled again, vibrating through the walls. I reached for the door at the end, my fingers trembling as I gripped the handle. The last thing I wanted was to be caught in that narrow space with whatever was prowling just behind us. With a forceful twist, I yanked the door open. It swung wide, revealing a stairwell leading down into darkness. "This way," I urged Sarah, instinctively pushing her ahead of me. We descended quickly, the air growing cooler as we moved deeper. The stairs creaked under our weight, each step sounding like a warning. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see that shadow looming closer. "Do you think it followed us?" Sarah breathed, her voice laced with panic. "I don't know," I admitted, trying to sound calm. "We just need to keep moving." At the bottom of the stairs, I hesitated, momentarily blinded by the darkness. "Turn on your phone light," I said, fumbling to do the same. She clicked hers on, and the weak beam cut through the darkness, revealing another door at the far end of the small basement. Surrounding us were crates and scattered debris, remnants of an old storage space that felt abandoned for years. "What if there's nothing down here?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky. "What if we're just running away from nothing?" "Then we'll figure it out," I said, though doubts sank like a stone in my stomach. Just as we turned to move toward the door, a loud crash echoed above us, shaking the ceiling and sending dust falling like rain. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to get out of here." Together, we reached the door and pushed it open. It creaked ominously, revealing a small room beyond, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights. The air was thick with an unsettling energy. As we stepped inside, a chill swept over us, and I froze at the sight before us. On the far wall, inscribed in what looked like blood, were symbols and markings I didn't recognize. They twisted and turned in a chaotic pattern, making me feel dizzy. "What is this?" Sarah whispered, her wide eyes scanning the markings. I shook my head, a cold grip of fear tightening around my chest. Maybe it's related to the source. Suddenly, the growl echoed again, reverberating from somewhere closer now, deeper in the room. It was joined by a series of quick, frantic noises that sounded like scratching. "We have to go!" I shouted, adrenaline surging through me. "Now!" Just as we turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind us, leaving us in the room with the awful noises. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Someone's in here!" Sarah cried, backing away slowly. I pressed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. That was when I heard it again, a low, rumbling laugh that sent chills prickling along my spine. I swiveled around to face the room, shining the phone's light everywhere. That's when I saw it, eyes glimmering in the shadows, staring right at us. My heart raced as those eyes glinted, reflecting the faint light. I couldn't see what was behind them, but an instinctual terror gripped me. "We need to find a way out," I shouted, desperately searching for another exit. "Look," Sarah pointed to the far corner, where a pile of crates leaned precariously. "We could climb over." I nodded, not wanting to waste another second. We sprinted toward the crates, but as I did, that growl rattled off the walls again, closer this time. The laughter came again, a low and sinister sound that sent waves of dread through me. I clambered onto the first crate, gritting my teeth as I glanced back. The eyes were closer now, visible between the shadows. And then the light flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. "Sarah!" I called, but my voice echoed uselessly in the void. "Here!" she gasped, scrambling up beside me. I could barely see her, just the outline of her figure. I could hear her breathing heavily, as panicked as I felt. We had to move. I reached for her hand to lead her, my fingers finding her wrist. "Let's go!" I pulled her toward the other side of the crates, a desperate push forward. But just as we scrambled to the edge, something crashed against the wall behind us, sending dust and debris flying into the air. We stumbled, and I felt my heart drop like a stone. "Go! Go!" I urged, shoving her ahead of me. We darted around the crates, stumbling over pieces of wood and metal. The growling intensified, a guttural menace that grew nearer with every step. There had to be a way out. The door we had come through had to be the way back. I cursed under my breath, the heavy feeling in my stomach urging me to hurry. But then a figure emerged from the shadows. It was impossible to make out, but I could see the outline. Tall and lean, with limbs that appeared to bend in unnatural ways. My breath caught. "Run!" I yelled, pushing Sarah ahead of me. I turned, ready to face whatever was coming at us. That's when I saw it clearly in the flickering light. A twisted face, grinning with jagged teeth. And those eyes, they weren't just watching anymore. They were hungry. We stumbled back toward the door, but as we reached for the knob, I felt a cold breath on my neck. I turned, my body tense with fear. Then, everything went dark. The flickering lights died completely, leaving us immersed in the blackness. "Sarah!" I shouted, but the silence was oppressive. I felt around me, clawing at the darkness, my panic rising. And then, slowly, the lights flickered back on. Not the fluorescent humming I remembered, but a dull, flickering red. In front of us stood the creature, grinning wider, moving closer, as if the darkness had granted it wings. I knew we had to act now before it closed in. But before I could think, I heard another voice, not our own, but a whisper coming from somewhere inside the room. "Help us." I froze, caught between questions and fear. Who was that? What did they want? I glanced at Sarah, her face a mask of confusion and terror. There was no escaping this. Whatever was happening, we were in it now. In the dim red glow, I could see the creature's features more clearly. A face distorted with snarls, eyes gleaming like shards of glass. The whispers echoed again, a chorus of voices wailing for help. Each plea pierced through my fear, igniting a desperate instinct within me to run, to fight. "Just keep moving," I yelled, and we lunged toward the far wall, looking for any way out of this. I felt the air shift behind us, the presence of the creature pressing in closer. Flickering in and out of the shadows, it felt like it was shifting, folding into the walls, ready to spring at any moment. As we neared the back wall, I spotted another exit door, a thin sliver of hope in an otherwise suffocating darkness. "There!" I pointed, urging Sarah forward. The growling became a low rumble, vibrating through the ground as I turned back for just a moment. Those eyes were fixed on us, drinking in our fear, relishing the chase. We reached the door, and I tugged at the handle desperately. At first, it refused to budge, a panic surging through me as I slammed my shoulder against it. "Open!" I shouted, my voice raw with tension. With one final push, the door flew open, and we stumbled out into the night air. It was a small alleyway, lit only by the faint glow of a street lamp at the far end. We didn't look back, we just ran. "Where do we go?" Sarah gasped as we sprinted away from that cursed place, the sound of growls echoing in the distance. I pushed myself harder, adrenaline flooding my veins. "We need to get to my car," I yelled, leading her toward the nearby parking lot. My heart raced as I scanned the shadows. Every rustle sent a jolt of fear through me, stoking the flames of dread. Whatever had pursued us was still close, waiting, calculating. As we reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. The growl, now a low growl of threats, resonated like a drumbeat. "Hurry," I urged, flinging open the passenger door and beckoning her inside. Just as I climbed into the driver's seat, the growl morphed into something more, a whisper carried by the wind, echoing each letter of my name. I froze again, but only for a moment. The intensity pulled me back into motion. I slammed the car into gear and tore out of the lot, tires screeching against the pavement. The empty road ahead barely registered through the cloud of fear hanging in the air. I knew that whatever I had experienced was far from over. I looked at Sarah, panting heavily, but alive, still with me. "That was insane! What the hell was that?" she exclaimed, turning her frantic gaze to me. I think it's connected to everything," I stammered, glancing at her wide eyes. I could feel the weight of the stories from the library, the man's warning, everything I had felt lurking in those woods. "They wanted something," I said, piecing it together as we drove into the murky night. "Those whispers, they knew our names. It was like we were being drawn in." "But what do we do?" Sarah breathed, her face pale yet determined. I don't know." My voice trailed off as my mind raced. "But we can't just ignore it. We need to figure out what it all means, whatever it is that's trying to claim us." "They wanted something," I said, piecing it together as we drove into the murky night. "Those whispers, they knew our names. It was like we were being drawn in." "But what do we do?" Sarah breathed, her face pale yet determined. "I don't know. My voice trailed off as my mind raced. But we can't just ignore it. We need to figure out what it all means, whatever it is that's trying to claim us. Driving more recklessly than I had meant to, I felt the weight of our decision. This was no longer just a fleeting horror story. It was a reality woven with threads of the supernatural. The question of whether we had escaped or merely postponed the inevitable twisted in my mind like a specter waiting for daylight. As we left the town behind, my heart still heavy, I glanced in the rearview mirror. That uneasy feeling returned as I caught a fleeting glimpse of darkness pooling on the road we had just fled. Had we truly left the Watcher behind? Or had we only enraged it further? I still think about that night sometimes. I keep wondering if it was the cabin that was haunted, or if we stumbled upon something darker, a secret nestled in those woods that would not be easily forgotten. Whatever it was, it changed the way I see things. Maybe there are things in this world that we aren't meant to understand, but I can't shake the sensation that it's still out there, waiting, whispering my name, just out of reach.